Hello Animals fans and welcome back to another AniLysis. Today we're looking at William Roger Tennant. And it took me a while to find a photo online that I thought looked like sort of what he would look like. Picture this guy but a little more smiley looking, just a little bit more friendly looking. But yeah, I picture him with that sort of shirt, with that sort of hair, maybe a little browner because that's quite grey, but that's near enough the guy that I think, and you'll see him in the thumbnail if you clicked on this video. So William Roger Tennant, how does he get involved? Well, he's only involved in one book in the series, and that is from book 35, The Proposal, which I do have here. He's in this book and only this book. How is he introduced? Well, Marco is channel surfing. He's a bit bored at home. Got the TV and the remote, clicking through, and this happens. There was nothing on TV worth watching. Lousy game shows, corny old movies, boring murder mysteries, primetime soap operas. But I continued to flip channels like a robot stuck on the same mindless function. I stopped on a talk show I'd seen a few times before. Contact Point. It was hosted by some guy with a 3-word name. William Roger Tennant. Not your typical talk show. No audience, no guests, no comedy monologues. Just this Tennant guy sitting cross-legged in a big comfy chair, surrounded by 6-foot-tall lava lamps, a bottle of designer water at his side. People called in with problems, and he gave them helpful advice. There was something about the guy that made you want to like him. He was so relaxed, like nothing could possibly bother him. And he seemed to be actually interested in what people had to say. Every caller was the most fascinating person he'd ever spoken to. I don't know why I kept watching. I'm not a talk show kind of person. Maybe it was because I was hoping William Roger Tennant would say something to make me feel better. See, there's another complication to my dad's having a girlfriend. A serious one. But William Roger Tennant didn't say anything that made me feel better. He said something that made me even sicker than my dad's middle-aged Romeo impersonation. A woman caller was complaining about being lonely. She was retired. Many of her friends had passed away in recent years. She was having a hard time meeting people. William Roger Tennant listened intently to her complaint, looked through at the cameras. "Marie," he said, "I know a great place where you can make friends. It's called The Sharing." There's a reason I always compare this book to book 12, The Reaction. Firstly, it's a guy with 3 names, William Roger Tennant, Jeremy Jason McCall. But it's a celebrity using his celebrity status to encourage people to join The Sharing, which is the Yerkes frontal organisation. We learn pretty quickly that this guy is indeed a controller. We know Tennant's a controller. Axe and Tobias saw him sneak into a Yerk pool through the Gap entrance yesterday morning. So we've got a TV talk show host who turns out to be a controller advertising for The Sharing. That is the basic premise of this character. Let's just have a brief look at how he's described in terms of appearance. William Roger Tennant. A smiling bearded face. Light brown hair pulled back into a ponytail. Faded jeans and a casual button-down shirt. Everything about him was laid back, easygoing, cool. But behind it all, behind those warm, smiling blue eyes, was an evil alien slug, bent on making every single human being on Earth a helpless slave. So basically he's like this aging hippie sort of chap. Sort of like the guy I've got pictured here, except with lighter, browner hair and more of a smile going on. But yeah, that sort of guy. Tall bloke, easygoing, laid back, chill about everything. So that's the beginnings of his personality. Let's have look at a few more personality traits with this guy. And we're talking both human personality, the host, and the Yerks. But let's cover the human personality first. We're going in tomorrow. Meanwhile, we're learning Tennant's habits. But we know his habits. And in the past 3 days, he hasn't done anything even remotely illegal or scandalous. The guy's a saint. Yeah, I know, Cassie agreed. The guy's squeaky clean. He spent his entire life helping people. He's given millions to charity. Doctors Without Borders, the Humane Society, all kinds of diseases, the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. I mean, if I didn't know any better, I'd love this guy. And he's got tons of famous friends, which is probably why the Yerks wanted him on board, I said. He's a perfect recruiter. No, Visser. I don't feel I should kill the bird. I must maintain William Roger Tennant's animal-loving image. But yes, these cockatiels are very annoying. Pause. Then, yes, Visser, the day will come when we exterminate all irrelevant creatures. Looking forward to it. When I was first given this host, William Roger Tennant went on, his voice mellowing, almost as if he was speaking to an audience of rapt TV viewers. I never thought my greatest challenge would be having to be as patient, as kind, as loving as this meandering, mewling, pathetic human. Who would have thought it would be so difficult to keep up this ridiculous charade? It takes a great deal of love to excel in any field, William Roger Tennant continued through gritted teeth. You have to love what you do, and love the people you do it for. If you really believe in something, Tennant continued, you must be willing to sacrifice all, to endure anything, to fight against all adversaries, no matter how large or small. You must be willing to never give in, never surrender, until the battle is won. The battle, ladies and gentlemen, the battle to love. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for this honour. Good night. We can safely assume that even though Tennant is a controller, that these are the personality traits that he embodied beforehand, as is basically explained in the book, because this yerk in his head is saying, I've got to keep up this facade, or keep up this charade of who this guy actually is, I've got to act like he acts and do what he does, and even says it's hard to pretend to be this loving, kind, generous human being that William is. So the actual host, William Roger Tennant, the real William Roger Tennant, is a very saintly human being. A good-natured, jolly sort of chap. And there's nothing in this book to suggest otherwise. He's actually a genuinely decent human being. The yerk, on the other hand, has a bit of an angry streak. And the animal said this about the yerk. This guy's a psycho, Rachel said, perched on the top of the open door. I mean, even for a yerk, this guy's a psycho. We're talking, where's my medication? Lock me up in a rubber room, psycho. And that's basically the gist of it with the yerk. A terribly not politically correct description for him. It's amazing Animals hasn't been cancelled yet. I learnt something today that people are saying that the word insane is now wrong. Using the word... That's what I was looking up at the dinner table today. You remember I was on my phone?
Yes, which is weird for you.
I know, I was looking it up and actually people are saying that words like crazy and insane are offensive.
I don't give a fuck what they say. They're crazy and insane.
Which means that Marco's catchphrase is now politically incorrect. Cancel Animorphs, cancel it, because Marco says things are insane. Whatever, that's... I'm not even going to attempt to cover that topic in a video on my channel, because it's... world's mad. Anyway, yeah, they describe the yerk as a psycho who should be locked up in a rubber room. And what else do we know about this guy before we get into the actual plot stuff? So, he lives in a mansion. So he's obviously earned his money. He's earned a lot of money. And he lives in this grand mansion with courtyards and everything. So let's have a look at a couple of quotes to back that up. It had turned out that William Roger Tennant owned a huge beachfront mansion. 3 stories, lots of windows, a compound filled with a variety of trees and shrubs, hedges sculpted into animal shapes, a stone wall covered with ivy surrounded the property. We landed on the stone wall encircling the compound, watched William Roger Tennant cross the courtyard and go inside through the main entrance. From our perch we could see into Tennant's office. It was hard not to. 2 of the walls were made almost entirely of glass. The room had an amazing ocean view. So that's where this guy lives, a big mansion. And we've already sort of covered what he does, but let's just zoom in on the details of what he does to earn this status and to be able to afford such a luxurious beachfront property. Anyone ever hear of a guy named William Roger Tennant? I asked. Sure, Rachel answered. The hippie guy. The one with the weird touchy-feely talk show with the lava lamps. Contact Point. Didn't he write all those Men Are From Jupiter, Women Are From Venus books? Jake asked. Mars, not Jupiter, Cassie corrected. Tennant has written a lot of self-help books. My mum reads them. Reads them and for like 2 days she's all mellow. Then it wears off. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honour, host of Contact Point and author of several best-selling books, William Roger Tennant. So we know that he's got this show Contact Point, which is the talk show that we mentioned earlier that Marco saw him on. So where he just sits back and talks to people who phone in front of these lava lamps. But he's also written best-selling books, including Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, which is a terribly transphobic book. I'm surprised he got all the money he did with such awful...
That was written by John Gray, thank you very much.
Who?
John Gray wrote that book.
John Gray. Who's John Gray?
The guy who wrote the book.
Yeah, but was he like this guy?
I don't know. All I know is, he wrote that book.
Written in 1992 by this guy. He doesn't look like William Roger Tennant.
No, but like for example, my dear, like when a guy's really upset, they tend to like close themselves off and figure it themselves.
Yeah.
Women want to ask lots of questions to make you feel better, and that's not how it works.
Okay, but this guy's a counsellor.
Yeah, so he like gets inside the head of women and men and tells you how we're different, so we can relate better.
So he would be cancelled today. So this guy must be loosely based on John Gray, who was a counsellor. Fair enough. I've learnt that from you, Pebble. I assume, unless the authors had never heard of it and just coincidentally made this fake title, but yeah, so that. So, the set Contact Point. We get a couple of little descriptions of... What? Yes, my dear, the cat. They can't see on the screen. You're always just slightly off screen, Mersha. What was I saying? This thing always freaking... It's so sensitive.
If you yell at it, it changes.
That's probably it. I'm probably yelling too much. But anyway, Contact Point. The set where this guy made a good portion of his money, you'd assume. How is it described? We get a couple of little descriptions, and they are thusly. So far, everything was going according to plan. William Roger Tennant was sitting on the set of his comfy chair, arms and legs crossed, eyes closed. Tobias and Axe had scouted the place earlier in the week. They had made a crude sketch of the layout. We'd memorised it. And they had made notes about Tennant's usual behaviour. Like the fact that every night before the show, Tennant chilled for about 20 minutes. Alone with only his lava lamps for company. I wondered what the thing was with the stupid lava lamps. Did they remind him of the Yerk pool? Or did he just miss the 60s? The studio itself was low budget. Not much larger than a 3-car garage. Pre-airtime, the place was eerily dark. The bubbling lava lamps gave the air a weird reddish glow. Tennant's chair was in one corner of the set. A pair of TV cameras faced the star's chair. This Contact Point set has a reddish... So it starts off with everything turned off apart from these lava lamps. And you can just picture this guy sitting in a chair, eyes closed, just sitting there with these lava lamps, which must be either an orange or a red, which strikes me as a strange colour for a talk show, but that's what it's described as, so must be what it is. Just these 2 lava lamps behind him, he's just sitting there like that in this dark. He's sitting in a corner, there's 2 cameras in front of him, probably one more central and one off to the side. Filmographer here. And yeah, that's what you'd picture with this. It doesn't really describe his chair or anything like that, but that's that. So, what is this guy's home life like? So that's what his work life looks like. What's it like at home? Let's have some descriptive looks of what it's like. William Roger Tennant emerged from the compound, dressed in a dark blue running outfit, did some stretches, then started his jog along the beach. Like clockwork, Cassie said. Every morning, William Roger Tennant went for a 45-minute jog along the beach. Same path, same speed, same distance. It's the same thing every day. From 8 AM to 8:45 AM, he goes jogging, comes home, takes a shower, Sits at his desk and works for a few hours. Writes on the computer. Makes a few phone calls. Eats lunch at his desk. Feeds the birds. Talks to them. Then at 5 o'clock he hops in his limo and is driven to the TV studio. By the time Tennant walked back through the gate of the compound, I felt a little better. I know it's hard, but try to see the positive side of the situation, Cassie said as we watched Tennant do his post-jog stretches. The office door opened. William Roger Tennant, now dressed in his usual faded jeans and rumpled button-down Oxford shirt, walked over to his desk and sat down. He raised his left hand close to his face. Perched on his finger was a grey feathered creature about a foot long. He raised it up to his lips and gave it a dainty little kiss. William Roger Tennant had a large collection of domestic birds, finches, parakeets and cockatiels. He suddenly sat up on his haunches, looked back, left, focused, right, up. As far as we knew, William Roger Tennant lived alone with his posse of birds. A housekeeping service came in and cleaned the mansion every morning. Had to be every day, what with the birds crapping everywhere. Except for Tennant and the birds, the house was empty all afternoon. Once Tennant sits down at his desk, he's usually there all afternoon, Jake went on. He's a lucky bugger, isn't he, my dear? Whoa! Spends all day at home with his posse of birds. Whoa! Crikey!
Well, you spend all day at home with your pussies.
It's a foul. How dare you? That's not politically correct either. Cancelled. You. That's it. Sellotape thine mouth.
No.
No? I'll have to do it later then. Just like William probably does with his posse of birds.
No.
Whoa! Get in, lads. Way! It's actually like feathered birds. God, I like the feathered birds too. When they get the feathers and they... So, actually, like birds, like avians. Not those sorts of way birds. This is going too far, isn't it? This joke wasn't even funny to start with and it's carried on regardless. So he hangs out with his harem in his mansion, but he's got a very rigid schedule. So he jogs at exactly the same time every morning. He comes back, does his post-jog stretches, goes back in, does all the morning stuff that blokes do. Apparently he doesn't shave though. And then he sits down at his desk where he spends most of the day probably writing his self-help books. And then he goes to work to do his filming. And that seems to be the life of William Roger Tennant, apart from the fact that there are avians flying around everywhere at all times. So he's a man of simple needs, apart from the mansion and the TV show and the books. Apparently he's genuine though. Anyway, so there's that. Let's move on to how this guy is involved plot-wise. So at the start of this video we talked about those quotes where Marco saw him on the television and found out, oh dear, this is a bit of a problem. This guy's clearly a controller, which they do find out, and he's telling people to go to the sharing. What is the plan that the Animorphs want to engage in? The real problem is William Roger Tennant himself, Tobias said. We've got to find a way to get him off the air. Permanently. Yeah, but how? I said. We'd dig up some dirt on him, Rachel said. Major smear campaign. That's how you take down a celebrity. Unless he's like a politician or an athlete. They're immune. Jake frowned. This means surveillance. We watch him, starting now. When we have the info we need, we take him down. Marco, take axe and see what you can find online. An address would be a good start. They go to William Roger Tennant's mansion, have a bit of a look around, a bit of a scout, and that's where they discover this mass amount of birds in his house. And they think, this is a great way to get in, do a bit of spying work. Rather than using the Chi, you know, the ultimate spies who would have been perfect for this job. I looked back on my review of book 35 to get information for this video. I noticed myself saying that the prior 10 books to this one, 10 whole books before this, the Chi were involved. They're the ultimate spies, according to the books, verbatim. And this is the first time after 10 books that the Chi weren't involved, and it's when they were most needed. I know, it's stupid, isn't it? But Chi-spiracy, go watch that video. But the animals decide that this spying job is one that they want to do themselves, and they think that the birds are a perfect opportunity, or maybe too perfect. William Roger Tennant owned 10 cockatiels. Along with the other birds, they seemed to have free reign of the house, although they spent most of their time in an open aviary, all of which made them perfect morphs for spying on Tennant. Maybe too perfect. Remember, this could be a trap, Jake said. Tennant knows about the Andalite bandits. He knows that at some point we'll try to come after him. What better way to kill us than by luring us into his house in vulnerable morphs? Despite this clear risk, the animals go ahead with the mission. And it does seem a bit strange, considering as well that they pretty much know that William Roger Tennant's going to know about the Andalite bandits. And he's just started doing the whole talking about the sharing thing. And remember, of course, back in book 12, when Jeremy Jason McCole started talking about the sharing, and things went a bit wrong for him. So the Urks, yeah, they know what's going to happen. So you're right over there, my dear. Yeah? You think I'm on point? Well, it turns out there's loads of Hork-Bajir and controllers in that mansion anyway, so it pretty much is a trap, but it's not a very good trap. Anyway, during the course of this mission, we find out that William Roger Tennant is in direct contact with Visser 3, and is also somehow involved with the creation of a new Kandrona. William Roger Tennant stared at the phone as if it were a diseased enemy. Finally, he picked up the receiver. His hand was shaking just a bit. Hello? I couldn't make out the voice on the other end, but I knew who it was, and my own fear seemed to infect the cockatiel's body. I could feel its feathers bristling with panic. Its little heart began to beat like a machine gun's rapid firing. Yes, Visser, William Roger Tennant said, with all the enthusiasm people usually reserve for hearing a terminal diagnosis from their doctor. Everything is going just fine, Tennant muttered. I'm just finishing that letter now, Visser. Yes, Visser. The construction of that Kandrona is coming along right on schedule. The construction of that Kandrona is coming along right on schedule. Yes, Visser. The president of the network will be at the Solid Citizens Awards banquet this weekend. As you know, I will be receiving an award. I fully expect the human to take the occasion to offer me a primetime slot for the coming season. He's going to primetime TV? Figures. It's not like the UPN needs him or anything, Rachel said. We never find out what this letter is, nor do we find out how this guy's connected to the Kandrona. Those are just sort of thrown in there and never addressed again, which is rather strange. Why is this guy anything to do with the Kandrona? Surely he's just a recruiter. Maybe he's a sub-Visser? We never find out. But he's obviously of some importance if he's direct contact with the Visser, unless Visser's just doing his micromanagement again. But I think more likely this guy's potentially a sub-Visser. I would not be surprised. But we never do find out. What we do find out, however, is that he's a bit mad. And as soon as Marco starts going a bit weird and ends up dropping things upon his desk while he's making this phone call, he puts down this phone call for Visser 3 and then starts to throw books at Marco. And he's a great shot, by the way. The happiness guru picked up a remote control and punched a button. Shades began to lower across all the windows. He was making sure no one saw him. Uh-oh. I shot toward the door. Not so fast, little birdie, Tennant hissed. My super keen ears heard it coming. A book. A big, hardcover book. Bonk! It nailed me. I fell to the carpet. Wind knocked out of me. Stunned. Brain whirling. Tennant pounced on me, snatched me up in his hands and pressed his thumbs into my chest. Started to squeeze. My eyes were locked on Tennant's face. He was gritting his teeth. His pale blue eyes bulged, suddenly shot through with red veins. A vein in his temple swelled and throbbed. He looked like he was going to explode, erupt like a broken cyst, but his hands were no longer tightening. Then I got it. The Yerk was struggling, battling something within the body, battling William Roger Tennant, the real human named William Roger Tennant. "Oh, little birdie, Tennant whispered. "If only you could hear my host's cries of anguish, his pleas to spare your worthless life. Humans! Such a weak, sentimental species." Then he loosened his grip and began to stroke my feathers. "Oh, how I would love to kill you," he crooned, if for no other reason than to hear the cries of agony from this pathetic host's tortured mind. Oh yes. But I won't kill you. Not now. No. I'm looking forward to the day when I can kill all of you horrible little creatures at once. Oh, what joy that will be. Perhaps such carnage will be enough to break this human spirit once and for all. I find this part very interesting because I don't exactly recall how many times we had this happen, where a host is so strong-willed that they're able to some extent overpower the Yerk, the actual controller. Assuming that's what you call the Yerk part. That's a video for another day. What is a controller? What's a host? Yeah. But I know that the Chapmans back in book 2 were able to do this to a degree, where they were able to fight the Yerk for a sustained period. And William Roger Tennant is capable of doing it here. And from what we know about his personality, how this Yerk talks about the man William Roger Tennant, the actual guy, it's because he's so strong-willed, and his love for his animals is clearly so great that it's able to overpower the Yerk inside of his head, which is quite
remarkable.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. And clearly this is a guy of strong moral principle. It's just a shame that his Yerk is a bit of a dick. But that may well be because of who William Roger Tennant is. You're the Yerk inside this aging old hippie's head who loves his animals so much more than anything else. It's the only thing he lives with. He spends all of his day with these birds. So, yeah, you'd probably go a bit psycho as well if you were this particular Yerk. So anyway, he's now attacking Marco, but then things get a bit out of hand, shall we say. "Don't you know your name, little birdie?" Tennant hissed, eyes narrowing. "All my precious little birdies know their names." "Make your move, Marco," Rachel said. I bent my legs, ready to spring. Sudden suspicion darkened his face. "Unless you aren't one of my precious birdies at all." I jumped backward, out of his hand, flapped frantically, trying to get out of his reach. "Unless you're one of the AniLysis bandits in Morph. Computer! Alert status 1. AniLysis intruders!" Wham! Ah! I hit the carpet beak first. One of my wings was broken, bent completely backward. I could feel one of the long wing bones popping through the skin. "Fool of an AniLysis," Tennant gloated. He kicked the huge dictionary aside and scooped me up in his sweaty palms. Rachel dove for Tennant's head. Feet first, she dug her claws into his hair. "What the?" Tennant growled. "What the?" Rachel shot upward, away from Tennant's swinging hand, still holding his hair. I wanted to put this earlier in the video when it came to his appearance, but I thought it was better suited here. The part where we learn that his hair is actually a toupee. He's actually bald. He's as bald as a chicken nugget without the breading. Yeah. That's an apt description, isn't it, my dear? Bald as a chicken nugget. Yeah, he's everything starts to kick off at that point. And it did turn out to be a trap, because there's loads of Hork-Bajir in this building just waiting to pounce, and pounce they do. And the other animals pounce as well, so it turns into a battle inside this mansion. During which we find out that William Roger Tennant exercises his Second Amendment rights. I heard the sounds of a battle in the long hallway. "Watch out! Tennant's got a gun!" So that covers that particular scene. There's a couple other things in there we learn as well. One, that he's the world champion book thrower. He manages to hit a flying cockatiel with a book on 2 separate occasions. He's an excellent marksman. Who's Mark? Did you get it? Marksman.
No.
I'm doing Richard, my dear.
Got it.
Yeah. That was actually a copied joke. See, even the jokes I copy don't get a laugh from you. We also learn that each one of his birds has its own name and is able to remember that name and speak it. So these birds are obviously to some degree able to impersonate our language, and he gives them all names and they speak those names. A very clever harem he's got there. But next step in this wondrous book is the next step of the plan for the Animorphs, which is where they tried to make him go a bit mad in public. So they've seen this display of him going a bit crazy in his own mansion, and they want that to happen in front of other people. There's a banquet going on that was mentioned earlier, this Solid Citizens Award, and the Animals think if we can get him to screw up there, you know, that's in front of a lot of people, and the end goal is to get him off the air, stop him spewing all this the sharing nonsense. And what better way to do it than by making him look bad in front of all the right people? So this is them outlining the plan. Normally I would complain. Normally I would point out that the very idea of this mission was insane. A 10 on the 10-point insanity scale. But I couldn't say a word, because Jake had let me come along on the mission to infiltrate the Solid Citizen Awards and destroy William Roger Tennant's image. Our mission was simple. We'd seen for ourselves that Tennant's yerk was not a shining example of mental stability. I mean, in the dictionary next to wacko, they could have used his picture. What we needed was to show that to the world. If we could get him to go off in public, well, bye-bye, guru. The banquet was taking place at a big hotel near the beach, not far from Roger William Tennant's mansion. We'd been on a mission there before, when we tried to stop the Yerks from infesting several of the world's most powerful leaders. So Marco thinks that the mission is insane, but he knows that Tennant's a wacko, and it surely shouldn't take that much to make him go a bit crazy in front of all these people. So the animals decide to morph invertebrates, namely a spider and a bunch of cockroaches, and go into his food, which is being served from the kitchen. It doesn't go very well. Here is a series of quotes going over that whole scene. Okay, let's get to the kitchen, find Tennant's food, and see if we can't get Mr. Mello to freak out, Jake said. Tennant doesn't like tomatoes. Could you set aside a salad without tomatoes for him? Whatever. I watched as the guy reluctantly removed one of the salads from the shelves and picked the slices of tomato out from it. Here, I said, grabbing the bowl from him. I'll take it. Holding it in my right hand, I lowered it out of his sight. Troops deploying, Jake said. When everybody was aboard, I turned to the salad guy again. I'm going to leave this salad on the top shelf here, okay? That way it won't get mixed up with the others. Don't forget to tell the waiter this special salad is for William Roger Tennant, okay? Go away, little person. I'm busy. I set the bowl on the top shelf. Now I had to join the party. No problemo. Morph to spider, run out to a spot directly above the salad, drop into said salad, bide my time, and scare the pee out of Tennant. Roaches and a spider? No one can see all that in his salad and not become slightly disturbed. I sprinted up the few steps of the raised platform. Three guests sat on each side of the podium. William Roger Tennant was seated to the immediate left of the podium. The podium blocked my view of his salad. I reached Tennant just in time to see him lean over to the person on his left and say, "These tomatoes look delicious." Ah! The scream came from behind me. That doesn't sound like Tennant, Tobias said. It sounds like Zach, Cassie cried. I spun around. Zach Hansen had fallen backward in his chair. What basically happened is they got the dishes mixed up. So they put aside a specific plate for William Roger Tennant, but the kitchen crew gave the wrong dish to the wrong person. There's a group called Hanson there, like three mini Justin Biebers or what have you in a group. And they're the ones that get the wrong salad and they're all screaming. So Tennant doesn't get it. So they have to move on to another plan. There's a few failed plans in this book, which is one of the reasons this book is actually quite charming. So the next plan is basically to get on board Axe, who would go to William Roger Tennant and contact him, and they'd get onto Tennant that way. And from that point on, there'd be fleas, and they'd get under his toupee, so that they could annoy him while he's doing his speech in front of the banquet. Here's some quotes going over that scene. Axe yanked the plate from a woman's hands. It came away suddenly. Leftover salad flew straight into William Roger Tennant. Tennant yelped. Axe licked the plate, his tongue extended to full maximum. Then he moved methodically on. He reached for Tennant's plate. Soon it will be time to jump on the target, Axe reported blandly, as if everything was otherwise perfectly normal. We're ready. Tennant was standing up, menacing, upset, but controlling it. I was just a few feet away, bounding along the dais. Axe grabbed Tennant's plate. Tennant held on. I'm not quite done yet, young man, he said. You must give me the plate. Axe yanked the plate and at the same time reached up with his flea-loaded hand and shoved Tennant down into his seat. Jump, Axe said. Everyone go, Jake ordered. I was close enough to hear Tennant growl. I'm gonna kick your... I grabbed Axe with both arms, held him back and yelled, Sir, we're not really bus boys. We're just really big fans. Can we have an autograph? We're in position, Jake said. We're under the toupee. Biting has begun. Unfortunately for our intrepid team, this plan doesn't work, and William Roger Tennant is made of firmer stuff. What is with this guy? Rachel muttered from her perch on Tennant's head. Is he made of Teflon? As crazy as this plan was, Jake said, it should have worked. On any normal human, it would have worked. I'm seriously out of ideas. There's got to be a way, Rachel said. There must be something irritating enough to make Tennant go off in public. And so we finally get to the master plan that the animals have hatched to dispatch of this William Roger Tennant. And that is a poodle that Marco has recently been introduced to. The poodle's name is Euclid, belonging to his soon-to-be stepmother, Nora. This is an incredibly annoying dog, and Marco thinks, perfect specimen. And so he proceeds to morph Euclid on various occasions, chasing William Roger Tennant around, hoping to get a reaction out of him. Slam! The gate shut behind him. William Roger Tennant took off down the beach, jogging at twice his usual speed. Pretty fast, but nowhere near fast enough. I shot out of the bushes. I was on him in seconds. He increased his speed, but he knew he was doomed. The smell of his fear, even stronger now, guided me like a heat-seeking missile. I pounced, 3 feet off the ground. I bit into his shirt with my iron jaw and held on, making a swimming motion with my feet so my claws could scratch his bare legs and arms. Stupid! Tennant screamed, along with a few other words I can't repeat. He was 10 times my size, a 6-foot-tall human against a 1.5-foot long toy poodle. One well-placed kick or punch, and he could have crushed my ribs or skull. But he couldn't do this. See, there were too many witnesses, way too many people on the beach who would be horrified to see the great animal lover William Roger Tennant beating a poor, innocent poodle to death. I will kill you, Anderlite, Tennant hissed, low enough for no one else to hear. For the next 2 days, Tobias and I followed William Roger Tennant like paparazzi on an actress. Hoping to go for an unmolested run on Wednesday, he took his limo out to a park near the river. We followed him, and I was there to catch him before he had jogged his first mile. Thursday afternoon, Tennant was scheduled to give a speech at the convention centre downtown. I was waiting for him just outside the main doors. Before he had a chance to climb the stairs, I'd ripped a sleeve off his suit jacket and torn a huge hole in the seat of his pants. He cancelled the speech. Thursday night after the show, Tennant met up with some local sponsors for a late dinner. In red-tailed Hawkmorph, Tobias and I followed the limo to the restaurant. I morphed again, and the minute his foot hit the pavement, I was peeing on it. His sponsors watched in horror as I pounced on him, grabbed hold of his tie with my teeth, and almost pulled him down face first onto the sidewalk. Of course, he couldn't fight back, couldn't kick me, couldn't slap me. Not with so many fans and sponsors and non-controllers watching. All he could do was smile. And this starts to work, and it culminates in a final showdown, which actually takes place on the show Contact Point. So they've left him alone for just a little bit so he can sort of get a false sense of security. And then he's a few minutes before the show, and the Animorphs come in, and what they tend to do is have Marco do his normal thing, go as Euclid, and Axe would turn on the cameras just at the right moment for everyone to see on national TV him basically beating the crap out of this dog. Okay, Jake said, here's the plan. Axe and I hit the control booth. Marco gets harassment duty as usual. We may only have a few seconds, maybe a minute of airtime before we get shot down. We have to catch, on camera, William Roger Tennant losing control. Rachel and Cassie will be in the studio as backup. Tobias is outside on lookout, and keeping an eye on the crew's pre-show meeting. Got it? The plan was simple, and only slightly more idiotic than the banquet fiasco. The network guy was in the studio to watch a live broadcast of Tennant's show, and we were in the studio to make Tennant look like the lunatic he was. That's where I came in. I was supposed to morph Euclid and bait Tennant before the show began. Had to be before the show began. Tennant was just controlled enough not to blow it in public. We had learned that at the banquet. He was crazy, but he was crazy in private. I would go after him, alone on the set, right where he could finally get his hands on me. When he attacked me, which he would, Axe would have cut into the computers and would send out a live feed across the country. This sort of goes to plan. It does really, but there's a little bit of drama that gets thrown in, because all throughout this book, book 35, Marco has been having morphing problems. See book 12, The Reaction, for a very similar plotline. So when this all begins, rather than just morphing Euclid, he morphs some weird Euclid polar bear hybrid. And so when he goes out to harass Tennant, it's probably a little bit too much harassment. But in the end, it all pays off. Wham! 800 pounds of hyperactive poodle smashed through the sheetrock wall. Prey, possibly a seal. Tennant jerked around. I crossed the 15 feet between us in seconds. Tennant dove out of the way, just before my hubcap-sized front paws smashed his chair into pieces. My prey dashed, ran for the door. Big mistake. Running just made me excited. Running was like an advertisement. Yes, I'm the prey. Please come and eat me. 4 massive steps and I was on him. I shoved him with my huge paws. He flew through the air and hit the wall. The seal was cornered. Down. Time for lunch. Of course, this polar bear poodle hybrid is soon put under control by Jake, activating super leader, his super leader ability. And Marco finally morphs the poodle and the poodle alone, which then gives Tennant the upper hand, but that doesn't play in his favour. Tennant reached down and grasped an electrical cord that was lying on the floor. He yanked one end of it out of the wall, the other from the stage light it was attached to. Tennant's makeshift whip could slice me in half. I cowered behind the remains of Tennant's chair. Crack! He missed me by inches. This is going to be so therapeutic, Tennant cackled. The cord slapped across my back, like I was being hit with a smouldering hot stick. William Roger Tennant dropped the whip, reached down and grabbed me by the neck, lifted me in the air, turned around to face the cameras, wrapped his hand around my throat and held me up in front of his face. He began to squeeze. I whined and struggled. Come now, Andalite, Tennant said, his eyes raving. You aren't going to die me that easily, are you? And we are live, Axe announced. Here's Marco. Suddenly, the entire stage was bathed in blinding light. What's going on here? "What kind of production is this?" a man thundered. "This is madness. You want to put this lunatic on the air? Try Fox, I'm not interested." You don't," Tennant stuttered. "It's all just a misunderstanding." "Boys and girls," Jake said, "I believe our work here is done." And that's where our story ends. Do we ever hear from William Roger Tennant again? Well, we'll let the book tell us. Thanks to Axe, William Roger Tennant's freakout was cut into a local TV broadcast. Naturally, the news networks ran with the video. CNN ran it roughly 4,000 times. No one had seen Tennant since. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the last we ever hear of William Roger Tennant. He just vanishes. And it does make you wonder what happened to him. My thoughts, he was corrected by Visser 3 in a violent and fatal manner. As you'd expect, he's failed the Visser here. He's terribly important. He's obviously got a lot to do with the Kandrona, and he's a big recruitment tool, but he's now no longer useful in that regard to Visser 3 as far as recruitment goes. So Visser 3 being as Visser 3 is, and Tennant shortly after disappearing for no one to ever hear of him again, leads me to believe that he was disappeared in a most brutal manner. Which is... I mean, this is quite a humorous book, but the undertone of all of this is that the actual host is a really nice guy who just loved animals so much, you know, just an animal lover who liked to help people, and likelihood is he's now dead. Dead and gone, never to be seen or heard from again, at least, you know, well, I mean, what's his harem going to do? Find another TV guru, I suppose. Maybe Dr. Phil will be in the area at the time. So yeah, that is William Roger Tennant. Rather tragic tale, wrapped up in what was actually a good book. I did like that book, and I do look back on it fondly. But a lot of it was borrowed from book 12, let's be honest. It's the only time Amos has done like a direct rip-off of one of his own books. But yeah, I think a good addition to the series, because we don't really get any more characters like this. Actual sympathetic hosts that you do actually learn a bit about, but things take a bit of a turn for the worse for them. The animals show no sympathy for the actual guy, which is a little bit weird. You'd think there'd be at least one or two comments in there about it, but it's only so many pages in a book. And it was largely a filler one. But I like this guy, William Roger Tennant. He's a good addition to the series, and actually I prefer him to Jeremy Jason McCole. I think this guy's got a bit more about him, bit more of an interesting story. But we'll get onto Jeremy Jason McCole at some point, and stick around for when that does happen. Anything you'd like to add, my dear? No?
Marcia's really cute.
Marcia's really cute, is she? But anyway, that is William Roger Tennant. If there's anything I've missed, please do let me know, and I shall add an addendum to this video. The next analysis, I've drawn the next 3. The next one is going to be on Henry V. That's right, I'm doing an analysis of Henry V, King of England. So yeah, look forward to that one. I shall see you next time. Ta-ra.